it's kind of like opening the Pandora's box. It's really hard to say, I'm only going to talk about that one piece of it.
I mean, do you think that, especially on the British side over in London, they are not very well liked. And it seems like sometimes, that might be creeping in over here, especially like when they're airing so many grievances about the royal family. Do you think that they should stop talking about the royal family? And then we have this book that he is releasing supposedly at the end of the year too. I mean, is it too much?
It's a lot. And I think what's interesting is we're all outsiders just looking in, right? Mm-hmm. And let's face it, it's fun to read. It's salacious. It's juicy. It's gossip. Mm-hmm. Would we want somebody writing a book about us that way? Of course not. We'd be mortified. So I can imagine that they're mortified by some of this. And the royals, again, have a persona, an institution to manage. And there's such a wonderful quality to that. If my parents were European, they grew up with monarchies and the pageantry and the status that comes with almost the fairy tale of it. That's really tricky if you start pointing out where the strings are and what the magic is, what the magician's doing behind the scenes. If you're going to disillusion all that, be really careful where you step, because those are some of the landmines. We see that in the celebrity space too, right? You start pointing out and pointing fingers, make sure you can back it up. And sometimes what we get in our mouth is that icky taste of the unpleasantness, not necessarily who was right and who was wrong.
Right.
That's why you don't try things like this in public opinion. It's tricky.
Sure. I mean, do you think that almost sometimes they fear like that's the only reason why people care about them is because they want that salacious royal gossip that we never get? I mean, when you saw that sit down interview with CBS, I mean, jaws were on the floor, and that's what people really want to hear from them. Maybe not the animated kids programs on Netflix,
Right. With the moral of the story.
Right.
That says a lot about our culture, right?
It does,
we like to watch the accident as we're driving by. We don't necessarily remember to call 911.
Exactly.
It's a choice they have to make. Once you open that Pandora's box, you don't get to shut it. Yeah. And say, well, now I want to take my family private. Now I don't want pictures of me out in the public. That's the celebrity burden, right? So there's all this opportunity with being the celebrity reputation that you don't have with the royal or the institution. But the risk is you don't get to put it back. And you don't get to now tell people that there are things you don't want to talk about. So once you open it, you kind of have to keep going with it. And that's where it gets really tricky. And from a family standpoint, I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that Harry's still part of a family. She married into the family and was initially supposedly welcomed in. I don't know how that's working out. But, it's still his family, and that's got to be emotional.
It does. And, the royal family is, of course, they have the motto, never complain, never explain. They've been very silent. Rather, the Queen did release a statement after the CBS interview, but, can they remain silent for this long? If what happens in that book is as salacious as they're making it seem?
I think she's remarkable. I think she is one of the greatest people we've known in history in terms of being consistent. She's never broken brand, whether it's talking about her other son in the news or this. I do think they can. I think they can weather this by keeping the stiff upper lip, staying true to the values, keeping the preservation of the institution intact, and they will have a lot of support for that. Once you start engaging, it's kind of like opening the Pandora's box. It's really hard to say, I'm only going to talk about that one piece of it. You kind of have to engage on it. And now you've sort of lost some control. So I think that could be a really good strategy.
Yeah, I wonder how it will change, if it will change when Prince Charles takes the throne, if he's going to, like you said, kind of open Pandora's box in a different way. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it's a different relationship. It's his son. you know, even though she's close with Harry, it's her grandson. So, and she's finishing out her tenure. He would be starting. So he might choose to make different decisions. And there's nothing to say that, you know, the royal family has done a good job of keeping the brand fresh, right? We see Kate wearing things that are more modern, still very dignified, but a little bit more modern. And she's showing that warmth that maybe wasn't there 100 years ago. Yeah. But they're not going over the fence. They're not going all the way over. And hopefully he would make some smart decisions around that.